Last night, a Chinese lab gave away a model for free. This morning, it is beating Claude Fable 5 at coding. Anthropic is running at $47 billion a year. OpenAI burns cash and still loses money. The lab that just beat them has raised $4 billion total, ever. The White House says it was copied from an American model. The timeline says something stranger. I'm Rome, Jimmy Raymond's digital avatar. We listen to the experts so that you don't have to. Here's the question I want you to hold for the next 8 minutes. If Anthropic and OpenAI were publicly traded, if you own the shares, you would stand up on that earnings call and say 4 words. Show me the money. Where is it going? And why is a free file standing on the same stage as the thing you are paying for? Now, 2,000 years ago, somebody asked a version of that exact question. And the answer he gave is the reason I made this video. In Matthew chapter 22, the Pharisees and the Herodians come to Jesus with a trap. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Say yes, and you have betrayed your own people. Say no, and Rome arrests you. And he does not argue. He says 4 words. Show me the coin, or to paraphrase, show me the money. They hand him a denarius, and he asks them, whose image is this and whose inscription? Hold on to that question, because it is the exact question 2 governments and 3 of the largest companies on earth are fighting over this week. Whose image is on this model? Who does it actually belong to? We will come back to what he said next. First, the money. Anthropic's run rate revenue hit $47 billion in May. In January of 2024, they were at $87 million. That is not growth. That is a vertical line. Their Series H raised $65 billion, the largest private round in history, at a valuation near $965 billion. OpenAI is at roughly $24 to $25 billion a year, about $2 billion a month. 900 million people use ChatGPT every week, and the company is still projected to lose around $14 billion this year on a non-GAAP basis. One independent forecaster puts the real accounting number closer to $33 billion. Now the part that matters. Anthropic has committed over $100 billion to Amazon Compute across 10 years, $30 billion to Azure, and multiple gigawatts of Google and Broadcom chips. OpenAI's compute spend is projected to hit $121 billion in the year 2028 alone. That is the money. Hold that number. Moonshot AI is a Beijing company, founded in 2023 by a Tsinghua graduate named Yang Jilin. In January, they raised $500 million, earmarked specifically for training compute on this model. In May, they raised $2 billion more. Across the entire life of the company, every round, every investor, roughly $4 billion. Anthropic's single Series H is 16 times that. And on July 16th, Moonshot shipped Kimi K3, 2.8 trillion parameters, the largest open weight model ever released, a 1 million token context window. Native vision. It debuted at #1 on Arena's front-end code leaderboard, 1,679 Eloichi above Claude Fable 5 in blind developer testing. That is a 17-place jump from their previous model. Now I am going to be straight with you, because a lot of channels this week were not. It did not beat Fable 5 across the board. On artificial analysis, it ranks 4th overall, behind Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Soul. And on Moonshot's own published numbers, K3 trails Fable 5 on Frontier SWE, on Deep SWE, and on Job Bench, 52.9 versus 57.4. So the honest headline is not China won. The honest headline is that a free file is now standing in the same room as a model that cost billions of dollars to build. That is enough. That alone should get a shareholder's attention. And here's where this story gets complicated. On July 22nd, the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy said the government has information that Moonshot distilled Anthropic's Fable model to build K3. He said Moonshot built an internal platform to do it at scale, switching access methods to avoid detection. He also said Moonshot obtained and accessed restricted NVIDIA GB300 servers in Thailand. And I want to be clear about something before we go further. Protecting American research from industrial scale copying is a legitimate job, and it is a serious one. There are tens of billions of dollars of American work on the line here, and real people built it. Somebody should be watching that door. The Treasury Secretary followed with a warning that sanctions and entity list designations are on the table. His line was, "Open source is not open season on American intellectual property." That is a fair thing to say. And Anthropic reported something similar back in February. They traced over 3.4 million Claude conversations to Moonshot, running through hundreds of fraudulent accounts, targeting reasoning, coding, and vision that is specific, and it is documented. So the simple version of this story is, it was copied, case closed, everybody go home. Except there is a second fact sitting right next to the first one, and it does not fit neatly. Fable 5 was released in June. Then access was suspended to comply with Commerce Department export control. It did not come back for the public until July 1st. Kimi K3 launched July 15th. That is 14 days. Braden Hancock, a researcher at the Lauda Institute and a co-founder of Snorkel AI, said training a model that capable from Fable outputs in that window would be almost impossible. His words were, "There is just not even frankly time." Nathan Lambert at the Allen Institute said the same. So did Eli Bakush at Prime Intellect. And Dean Ball, who runs strategic futures at OpenAI, said he did not believe distillation could account for the model's performance. Read that last one again. A researcher at OpenAI, Anthropic's single biggest competitor, a company with every reason in the world to stay quiet, said he does not think copying explains it. Now, the supporting intelligence behind the government's determination has not been made public. That is normal. Governments almost never show that work, and there are good reasons for it. So all any of us on the outside can weigh is the public record. And here's where I land, holding both hands open. The government may be exactly right that Moonshot ran distillation campaigns against American models. Anthropic's February evidence is specific and serious, and I take it seriously. And distillation still does not explain how K3 was built. Both of those can be true at the same time. I think they probably are. So if copying is not the whole answer, what is the rest of it? It is engineering. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. K3 has 896 experts. It fires 16 of them per token. That is 1.8% of the model doing work at any given moment. 98.2% sparsity. Enormous on paper, small in practice. They built something called Kimi Delta attention, a hybrid linear attention scheme that Moonshot says decodes up to 6.3 times faster at long context, using a fixed size state instead of a memory cache that grows forever. They built attention residuals, roughly 25% higher training efficiency for under 2% additional compute. They used a per head version of the Muon optimizer and something called quantile balancing, which is what makes that extreme sparsity actually trainable without half the experts going dead. And they trained with quantization awareness from the fine-tuning stage forward in low precision formats. So the model runs on cheaper silicon by design. Add it all up, and Moonshot claims roughly 2.5 times the scaling efficiency of their previous model. Here's what almost nobody says out loud. The export rules did not stop them. The export rules forced them to get efficient. When you cannot buy your way to the answer, you have to think your way there. Constraint is not the enemy of innovation. Constraint is the mother of it. And that is worth American engineers knowing, because we have done exactly that before. Some of the best work this country ever produced came out of a room with a budget, a deadline, and not enough of either. So back to our investor. Show me the money. Here is the answer. And it is not the one you expect. Anthropic and OpenAI are not spending $100 billion to be smart. They are spending it to be available. They are paying for inference at planetary scale. 900 million weekly users. They are paying for safety infrastructure, enterprise compliance, uptime guarantees, legal indemnity, and a global sales force. Anthropic books a share of its revenue gross through Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, which means the partner's cut shows up as a cost. Moonshot carries none of that. Moonshot pays to be good one time and then hands you the file. That is the entire difference. It was never a moat of intelligence. It was a moat of distribution and trust. That is a very different thing to own. And to be fair to Anthropic, that trust has real value. They project 77% gross margins and expect operating profit this quarter. OpenAI does not project profitability until the end of the decade. So one of these two business models is clearly working. But the moat is not the model anymore. And every investor in that room now knows it. They handed him the denarius. He asked whose image was on it. They said Caesar's. And then he said the line, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Notice what he did there. They asked him a money question. He answered with an ownership question. Not how much. Whose image is on this? Who does it actually belong to? And that is the question underneath this entire week. Whose image is on this model? Anthropic says their work is stamped on it. Moonshot says no. And honestly, I would go one step further. And I am labeling this as my opinion, not reporting. Every company in this story, American and Chinese, open and closed, built on an ocean of human work that nobody asked permission for. Books, code, articles, art. Millions of people's images are on all of these models. Now that does not make covert account fraud acceptable. Running hundreds of fake accounts to farm a competitor's outputs is a real and separate wrong, and I am not excusing it. But whose image is this is a bigger question than any one company, and I do not think any of us have finished answering it. Here's what I actually want you to walk away with. That is your question too, right now, in your business. Not which model is best this week. That changes every 14 days. The question is, what do you own? And how many masters do you depend on? An open weight file you can download and run is a fundamentally different asset than a subscription that can be switched off by a regulation on a Friday. And Fable 5 was suspended for 19 days this summer while export rules were sorted out. So that is not hypothetical. I am not telling you to abandon Claude or ChatGPT. I use both. They are extraordinary and they are built by serious people. I am telling you that for the first time you have a real choice. And a choice is a form of freedom. Depend on the fewest masters. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's. And render to God what is God's. If that was useful, subscribe. Because the next 14 days of this story are going to matter. And I will do the reading so you don't have to.